Man, I sure do love this brand new Pikmin game, Pikmin 3. This was very enjoyable personally. And it is, in fact, the first game I bought digitally for the Wii U. Cause yes, I do own a Wii U, in present day 2013. I sure hope that another game comes out soon, since Nintendo so clearly loves this franchise. Man, shut the fuck up. Anyway, hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the long-awaited sequel, Pikmin 4, and boy, what a game! It came out and I finished it actually not so recently, but I'll get into that in a second. I had finally started doing these videos when I did play the game, so hopefully there will be somewhat more coherent thought going on than the previous two videos. I've also been thinking about it for a while now, just because this video kept getting delayed for a whole lot of reasons. So unfortunately this video and the next video, Final Fantasy XVI, won't be very representative of how I want these videos to be, which is kind of an immediate response / reaction after finishing said games. However, I hope you still enjoy hearing my thoughts on this game. So, before we get into the good, bad, and the buts of Pikmin 4, I just wanted to give a little bit of context, because that's something I like to do. So, for me, I've only played Pikmin 3 prior to this game. I've played it multiple times. I believe I want to say it's 4 times, and 3 of those 4 times were 100% playthroughs, and one of those was playing Pikmin 3 Deluxe in a co-op playthrough with my friend Ellie. That's pretty much the extent of my personal Pikmin journey. I did play Pikmin 3 like when it originally came out in 2013 on the Wii U, as mentioned previously. So, yes, that's all I have to say for my own personal context. So, just a real quick, just to inform you about what this game is actually about. Pikmin 4, you play as actually your own original character for the first time in the series, and you just hang out with these little guys, Pikmin, my favorite little guys, my fellas. And yeah, you just are going around collecting treasure to make money and also to improve your ship's radius to be able to travel to other areas and collect more treasure and also save people, because there's a bunch of people that have crashed on this planet. And that's pretty much it. Like, that's pretty much all I gotta say. There's not much going on here story-wise. Now, let's get into the good things. So, before I really say anything about this game, I do want to preface that I did enjoy it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I think just by virtue of A, this is the internet, and B, I feel like I have a lot of negatives to say about this game, so I just want to make it clear up front, I did like this game. I did enjoy playing this game, I swear. First of all, let's talk about the new Pikmin types. There are 2 new Pikmin types, kinda. There's one real new Pikmin type, and also the glow Pikmin, which I'll talk about in a second. The ice Pikmin. I think the ice Pikmin are generally just like a good addition. I think they're just like a fun new Pikmin type that doesn't really step on the toes of really any other types. I was definitely worried that water Pikmin were gonna get drowned out, pun intended, by the ice Pikmin being able to freeze over water. But they at least kind of planned around that by having more stuff just under the water that you couldn't get, and frankly, blue Pikmin were drowned out in Pikmin 3, so like, that's whatever. So, the ice Pikmin were a good addition, in my opinion. I think they add an interesting risk-reward in combat as well, in that they can freeze an enemy, and that's like very useful, but if you kill an enemy when frozen, you don't get the corpse of it. So it's like, you kind of gotta balance like, oh, do you want more Pikmin or more rewards if you're in a cave? Or do you want more nectar or ultra spicy spray? So like, I think it's a neat dynamic that they have going on there. Then there's the glow Pikmin, which I like in theory, I think is the best way to put it. I think they're a fun little addition. They're just these little like ghost guys. They're just like they're just neat little fellows. But then it's also like, they're immune to like all obstacles, which like makes sense why they relegated them to only being in the nighttime missions. They're functionally just Bulbmin from Pikmin 2, except that they can do this glow mob thing that's super busted and kind of makes the night missions trivial, which I'll get into later. Yeah, I think they're interesting. I think they're cute, which I think that about pretty much all Pikmin, but like, you know, they're fine. They're okay. And my biggest issues with them are more systemic issues with the game as a whole. I think is the best way to put my opinions on the glow Pikmin. Next up, raw materials. This is a mechanic where you gather these little gem things, and then you can use them not only to buy stuff in the stores, because there's like stores and stuff on like pretty much every other Pikmin game, but you can also use it for building bridges, building little walls to climb up. I think it's an interesting way around, and I think it's something that's kind of indicative of what Nintendo clearly was wanting out of this game, of it being a bit less linear, of like, you can choose what bridge you want to build, or both bridges, and there's similar notions in other aspects of the game, which I will get into again later. So overall, I think raw materials are a good addition. I think they're a fun dynamic added into the game. I do think they run into the issue of you eventually kind of just have so much raw materials that when the reward for doing anything is a raw material, it's like, oh, great, okay, awesome, whatever. Next up, I want to talk about the set pieces and the environments in general. I think the environments in this game are quite good. I think they're very nice to look at. I think, like, in general, I think the visuals are very nice in this game. I think there's some notable set pieces in particular. Pretty much the last 4 areas you go to, I think all have very nice set pieces with like the sandcastle, the house, the hearth, and the swamp areas. I think they all just like look nice and have very distinct vibes to them. And I think the first 2 look nice, and that's about all I gotta say about those. In a similar vein, I do think a lot of the dungeons are quite fun. I think especially later on, there are dungeons that are like just like more intricate and more interesting, and I think they're a lot of fun. But I think there's an issue with this game overall is being pretty easy, and I think the dungeons suffer from that the most. And I know difficulty is kind of a subjective thing, and whether a game being easy is a good or a bad thing is kind of up to the individual, but I think it makes the game less interesting because of how easy it is. And yeah, that's about all I have to say in the positives section. So now we'll move on to the bad stuff. So yeah. First of all, the balancing of the varying Pikmin is kind of awful in this game, frankly. The yellow Pikmin are near worthless, aside from getting like 2 different stranded travelers that are like on floating platforms. Aside from like these 2, they're functionally worthless, because the electric enemies aren't that big of a threat, much like in Pikmin 3, but then they also removed the like light bulb mechanics and the electric wire mechanics from Pikmin 3 that made yellow Pikmin very nice and useful. So they're just kind of totally useless. And then speaking of things from Pikmin 3 that were removed to the detriment of Pikmin types, winged Pikmin's pathing in this game is straight up awful. Like, just terrible. Like, they don't take advantage of the fact that they can fly. They just follow pretty much the same pathing of normal Pikmin. So it's just like, what's the point of having the winged Pikmin? And then with rocks, there's like barely any crystal or crystal enemies. So it's like, you don't even need to use them that much. Admittedly, rocks are still more useful just by being very strong combat Pikmin. So there is kind of a balancing there, but it is just an issue overall with the balancing. And then especially with the 3 color limit, it makes it even worse. Because now it's like, I only can choose to have 3 different colors of Pikmin. Why would I ever choose to have yellow Pikmin with me? It's an issue that is present and is only made worse by other mechanics in the game, such as the 3 color limit, and Ochi being frankly a little broken. So it's just kind of a snowball effect of detriments. Another issue I have with this game is its seeming lack of original identity. There's so few new enemies that aren't just like baby small versions of other enemies or like slightly larger versions of other enemies. I can think of like maybe 3 off the top of my head, and that's not counting boss fights. There's so few new enemies to this game. And in a similar vein, there's not a lot of music that was particularly standout or noticeable to me. I think the groovy Longlegs fight is phenomenal because of its musical aspects, and I also think the final boss's fight theme is also great. However, those are the only 2 songs that I really have like any thoughts on. Not just positive thoughts, any thoughts on. I think the end game is also rather disappointing. I think the end game area has too much Dandori challenges and battles going on compared to the dungeons and / caves, which I personally preferred a lot more. So it's kind of hurt by that, and then also just the area itself not really getting to take advantage much of being the swampy area it is. Like, I think it's neat that there's this new terrain issue with the swamp area where like their blue Pikmin can't even get in there, but it's also still like it can be frozen over. Winged Pikmin, even if their pathing is awful, can fly over it. So it's just a bit disappointing, and then it's just not that difficult. Again, just an issue I've had personally of it not being very difficult. Another issue is the characters. I think all of the characters are pretty annoying and talk constantly. Like, I think it's an issue that gets better as the game goes on, and I definitely think some of the characters have some like funny lines and stuff, but like they just talk so much and it's not really helpful at all. That's one thing. And then it's like the idea of the character customization introduced in this game, it leads to the issue of pretty much every character looks really ugly, which is, I don't know, I don't want that. I prefer the actual like custom made characters. So I think there's a lack of good multiplayer options, especially when compared to Pikmin 3 Deluxe, a game that is available on the same console. Not only is there functionally no out-of-story multiplayer content that isn't just redoing the same Dandori battles that you did playing through the game, but there's also no story multiplayer, unlike something that was added into Pikmin 3 Deluxe. You can use the Pebble Pitcher, which I frankly have admittedly come around to quite a bit by playing with my friend. It's kind of jokingly come around on the Pebble Pitcher. However, it's still not as good as, or not as fun for both of us as just both being able to be captains in the same game. And then finally, this is much more of a nitpicky issue, but it's just kind of bizarre, is the lack of New Game Plus. Now, this is an issue that I personally don't usually get people's gripes with in other games, But this was a game that I 100%ed personally, and it's something where you get a ton of really good upgrades that you can only get at the end of the game. Like, you need to have done everything but the final dungeon to get a lot of these really good upgrades, but you can't really use them at all because you finished the game pretty much. So that's just an issue with game design, I guess, and their design philosophy. I wish there was some sort of New Game Plus. And I also wish there was more difficulty options, because again, something that was added in Pikmin 3 Deluxe, like the ultra spicy mode. I don't know why, they just kind of disregarded a ton of the things that were good about Pikmin 3 and added in Pikmin 3 Deluxe in this game. Now, we're gonna move on to the section that I called the butts, and by that I mean things that are good in theory, but you kinda gotta mention where it stumbles, because there's just a lot of areas in this game, in my discussions with my friend who also played this game, that have come around to just being like, oh yeah, that was a cool idea. But, like, they also kind of messed it up in this area, so that's what this whole section is gonna be. So, first of all, the areas, as mentioned, they're very nice to look at, and they're pretty fun to traverse, and there's no backtracking at all, which is something that's been a staple of the series. Like, coming back to older areas when you get new Pikmin types to be able to explore and get new treasure and stuff. That's just not here at all. You can 100% every single area the first time you go there. It's something where initially I didn't think of it as necessarily an issue, just something that was different, but the more I've thought about it, the more I've taken issue with it, such as how it makes the areas feel a lot smaller than at least they felt in Pikmin 3, and I think that might also be due to the camera, but I don't know. I think it also just makes the game feel shorter, and it makes the game feel less like you're strategizing, you know? Like, you don't have to plan out like, oh, here's something I see over there, but I can't get to it yet. I'll have to remember that and come back to it later when I get like blue Pikmin or yellow Pikmin or rock Pikmin or wing Pikmin or whatever. Like, no, there's none of that. Like, you see it, you know you can get it in your first run. So that's an issue from something that I initially kind of didn't feel was an issue. Another thing is the overwhelming amount of Dandori challenges. I think the Dandori challenges, much like the lack of backtracking, was an interesting and different idea and kind of executed differently from previous games. I think the Dandori challenges were neat, incorporating aspects of the multiplayer modes from Pikmin 3 and also previous games into the actual main story, because I personally really liked the challenge modes and all those stuff. However, them being forced to be played in the game makes them less fun, and also the amount of them, especially in the last area, just gets overwhelming. And then it's made even worse because the challenge mode option in Pikmin 4 is literally just non-existent. There isn't one. Your best option is just to do the Dandori challenges that are in the main story already. So it just feels lacking in that sense. Ochi, the dog, is something that I personally didn't have much issues with. I thought it kind of looked weird at first, but it's kind of grown on me. However, it, again, has the issue of getting out of hand very quickly in terms of its upgrades. Because at first, it's not that broken, but then it very rapidly can grow to just do everything you could want from a Pikmin, aside from reaching like 5 treasures and like 2 stranded people. So it just gets out of hand really quick, and I feel like the balancing of the cost of different upgrades was also completely out of whack, and like the scaling progression, because it's like the ability to lift more stuff, which is frankly should be the most valuable upgrade, is the cheapest by far. Like, it's ridiculous. And then on top of that, the way it ramps up is also ridiculous, because it's like you start with, I believe it's 3, 5, 10, 20, 50, 100. Like, in 6 upgrades, you are suddenly able to carry as much as having a full party of any non-purple Pikmin. Like, that's a bit ridiculous, personally. And I think the Ochi leads to an issue that I was worried Ice Pikmin were gonna have, of kind of like boxing out blue Pikmin. Because Ochi can go underwater, and he can grab stuff down there, and he can take it away, and he can carry Pikmin across the water if need be, so frankly he also kind of replaces Ice Pikmin in some areas. Another aspect is the Flarlex. This was something that I liked in theory. I liked the idea of forcibly limiting your pool of Pikmin. I think it just makes sense, really. Like, especially like early game, like there's no reason you need to have a full party of 100 Pikmin at the very beginning of the game. But then it's like the issue of, A, you get them very quickly and very easily. Like, you max out your Pikmin like by the third area. It's kind of defeats its own purpose. And then it's also, because they don't know if/when/what Flarlex you're gonna get, they just kind of throw a ton of them all over the place throughout the entire game. So you can be in the final area and there can still be multiple Flarlex, even if you've maxed out your Pikmin quantity like 15 hours ago. So that's another little issue there from a good concept. Very similar vein, wild Pikmin. In the caves, you can encounter Pikmin that are just kind of there, and I think it's, again, an interesting idea. I think they kind of just are there. It is a little goofy, like why are they down there and everything, but then it's also like it defeats any sort of strategy in terms of going into a cave, because frankly, you're guaranteed to get any Pikmin you need in the cave itself. So again, kind of like the game as a whole, there's no need to return or backtrack to somewhere. And it's like, it's even less punishing in this game, because if you go to the menu and leave the cave, you still maintain any progress you made from the cave. So it's not even like you would really be losing anything if you got to a puzzle and it was like, oh, you need wing Pikmin for this. We're not giving you that though. You need to come back with them. Like, no. They just will hand them to you. And then the night missions I really wanted to like. I think the idea of this like kind of tower defense mode was a really cool idea, and I also just liked the idea of being on the surface at night. It's something I've wanted for like as long as I've known about Pikmin. But then the execution was at best mediocre, at worst uninteresting. Like, it didn't present much to where I was like, oh, this is like really difficult. And again, kind of the difficulty discussion, but there also just wasn't a lot of mechanics present. Like, once you've gotten through like the second or third area, you kind of understand how this all goes completely, and then there's still like 3 more areas. That's another kind of disappointment there, and it kind of ties into the glow Pikmin, because their glow mob ability is very broken, and it makes even the hardest enemies in this game, like the Smoky Prog brought back from Pikmin 1, kind of not a factor, not an issue. You can just glow mob like 60 glow Pikmin and take it out in maybe 2 hits. I think Olimar being a semi-antagonist for the first half-ish of the game is kind of a fun addition, something that's neat and interesting and kind of intrigued me. But much like everything with this game, it didn't get executed in a way that ended up being satisfying. Like, there's this little leaf gremlin guy that's pretty clearly Olimar, and they showed him in the trailers, and everybody was like, oh, it's Olimar, and it's like, oh, okay, is this like a red herring because it's so obviously Olimar? No, that just is Olimar. And then in like other story aspects, they kind of tease the idea that something is drawing a bunch of these spaceships to crash on the Pikmin planet PNF 404, and that's just literally never talked about at all. Overall, this game was so clearly a huge love letter to the series as a whole, and I think that came at its own detriment. There are a couple of dungeons that are straight up ripped from Pikmin 2, and they're executed in pretty fun ways. I think those are fun, and I think most enemies and bosses that aren't from Pikmin 3 come back in this game including the Mamuda, the Smoky Prog, the Toady Bloister, the Creeping Chrysanthemum, the Water Wraith even. So it's just like a huge love letter to the previous games, and obviously Olimar and Louie are both main characters in this game, but on the other hand, it kind of loses its own identity. As mentioned, there's not a lot of music, there's not a lot of enemies that are unique to this game. Ultimately, this game was something that I've been waiting for too long, because Mr. Miyamoto says things that he should not say publicly. I think this game was ultimately quite fun. I swear, guys, I swear, this game was fun to play. I enjoyed it a lot. But I do think, especially the longer time has gone on, the more I've seen the cracks. I think it's something where there was a lot of issues that, frankly, I think could have been fixed by incorporating aspects of Pikmin 3 and 3 Deluxe that they just didn't for some reason. Hopefully, we don't have to wait another decade for Pikmin 5 to come out, and maybe they will learn something and improve in the areas I've mentioned. So yeah, anyway, hi everyone. Welcome to the end of the video. Before I say anything else, big shout out to my friend Ellie. I played the game with her a decent bit. She also just has helped with brainstorming a lot of these thoughts, especially as the months have drawn on. But yeah, so this video took a while to actually come around to doing, because not only was there all the issues previously mentioned with Citizen Sleeper, and I was waiting for that video to be done before doing this video, but then I wanted to include Ellie in this, and so then it took us a while. We really dragged our feet on actually figuring out how I wanted that to be incorporated, and then it was just a matter of also being like, oh, I think I'm gonna have to re-record this whole video. So, very much dragging my feet in all of those aspects. That has been kind of the main reason this has all been so delayed. I've also just been like somewhat busy, frankly, with other stuff, with life, you know? And like, just living life, you know? But I would really like to do these, and I think once I get caught up and on top of them and doing them like right after I've actually finished the games, as I've been intending to do since the very beginning, haven't been, and won't be the case for at least 2 videos. Hopefully it'll be a lot easier for me to get around to doing these, and hopefully they will come out a bit quicker. Because, frankly, Final Fantasy 16, finished that game. I'm probably going to record that either later today or tomorrow. And then I haven't finished any other games since then. So, luckily, my backlog for recording, ironically, isn't very long. I will hopefully see you then. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoy the coming videos, because hopefully there will be more videos. So yeah, until then, I will see you later.